it's a question I've also often asked my mother as to why my father foresaw so many things but did not foresee the fact that his daughters will not use the woman card, which he taught us not to use, but the rest of the world would not be ready for it. The
Right.
rest of the world would not be ready for a woman sitting, looking eye to eye, and talking
Mm.
business to it.
Vinta Nanda, welcome to my space. And I have no clear memory of how we connected. I do remember, however, that you are, in a way, I don't know, a nurturer of people. And there are so many stories that I have heard of you mentoring people and helping them and, guiding them to larger destinies. You try to do that with my book. I will never forget the blog you wrote about it and how you championed it. It's one of those memories I'll always be grateful for. And just the person that you are and the things you have said. And today, I really wanted to focus on how much insight and foresight you've had about where the country is going politically, creatively. As a creative person, you saw things coming that none of us really did, and you have a very, I think, surreal, almost a supernatural ability to read situations and foresee things before they happen. Today, I just wanted to go back a little about and kind of discuss some of the interviews that we did together, some of the writing that you have done. And one thing stood out to me as I was doing research today was something that your father had said to you when you were growing up. And he said that we are a generation that is doomed to fail this nation. As they had seen partition, your parents had seen partition from close quarters, and you grew up in a country which was also divided and continues to mutate and divide. And there is something that you said, which is politics and power all that matters. We have to admit that the triple speak of our political parties have brought India to a place where it is today. After so much bloodshed and so much inequality and pain, we haven't understood that the enemy within is us, ourselves, our apathy and our submission to politics. This is what you said. And about mass entertainment also, you said something very interesting. You said, um, instead of alternate multicultural cosmopolitan solutions, we now have content that endorses false values and hypocritical traditions. Today, thanks to our TV, we have a generation confused between fake morality and reality. This schizophrenia is dangerous for our future. And we see that happening everywhere. And how did you get this insight? And also, your father he worked for LIC, if I'm not mistaken. How were you drawn to the world of storytelling, to the world of cinema? Let's start there and then we'll continue.
First, let me thank you for having me in this room of yours. It's really a pleasure. And I think where we connected was with your book. I remember on Facebook, we became friends first. And that was decades ago, I think two
Yeah,
decades or so, more
2010.
ago,
2010.
2010. So that's more than a decade ago. And then I read your book, and it still, you know, uh, wakes me up to so many things about that time and space that your story occupied. And it is one of my biggest endeavors. Even now, I keep pushing that idea to OTTs and all, that we should make this series. And I pray and hope that we actually end up making it one day, because it's really a brilliant, brilliant story. And it also resonated with me, Rima, because I think you and me are the same generation, and we've kind of grown up in the same, uh, spaces in a certain sense, in that Indian middle class, as we call it. And we are Punjabis. So, in a sense, there's a certain similarity in the way we think and etc. And what I remember caught me very interestingly about your life, which reflects in many ways in your book, was to be surrounded with literature, to be surrounded with books, and your having read so much while you were growing up. And I think that was interesting to our generation per se, because for us, the window to the world beyond ourselves was, there was no television. It was there, but it was, it wasn't like pervasive. And for us, the window to the world outside was our literature and books. And cinema, of course, because even as we grew up, I think post my um, 10th year, I was now introduced to Indian cinema as well. Still remember my first film being Mera Naam Joker. And so, in a way, reading is really been a part of my growing up years. And I still remember, I mean, I don't remember when this interview that you're reading from happened. I mean, must have been many years ago. But the incident that my father said something like this to me is very, very vivid to me, because he had, I was in Ajmer where he was posted, and at that time I'd already moved to Bombay. It was still Bombay at that time, and I went home for a break, and I was with him and my mother. We were living in a lovely house over there, and there was nothing else to do but to keep talking to each other and catching up and stuff like that. And I remember asking him one day and telling him one day that, why are we racing against time? So he turned around and told me, he said that, yeah, that should not be so, because it's not natural to humankind to race against time. Time is supposed to give you comfort and not um, give you anxiety. And this is something I notice even in my organization. And he had been with LIC for donkey's years by then. So he says, I noticed with your generation of youngsters who are joining my organization also, they're in a hurry. And that hurry that you people are in is not natural. It's not something that human beings must go through at all, you know? And that's where your creativity ceases to be, because you rush. And I also feel, and that's when, in that context, he had said that this is what is going to make your generation fail this country, because every brick that has been put in place during the freedom movement and post partition, post independent India, which I have been a part of and my generation has been a part of. My working life began in the 50s. And from there, we have built this nation. Whether I was with LIC, I was a small cog in the wheel, but I was part of the building of the nation. And I was given by this very nation and by this very culture the space to think, the space to work at leisure, the space to bring up my children, the space to build a family. And all of it, when it comes together, you are contributing to the nation in a very calm and very, very sensible way. So, you guys are definitely going to be a sort of a train wreck. So, to me, he was advising, and which has been one of the most major advices of my life as a creative individual, to stop rushing, to stop hurrying, to give up things that make me anxious,
Mm.
because I will not lose anything by doing that. You know,
Yeah.
it's the business that will lose something by losing me, but I will not lose by losing the business. So, my entire creative journey, except for that period of time that I did multiple television shows, was about thinking, planning, doing things, and savoring them
Mm.
in a very immersive way. And those were the things that I uh, took as the message from my father's conversation with me. that don't let the immersiveness from your activity go away. Let the world fall apart, but you stay rooted to your immersion because it's the depth which is going to give you the bounce. And I think everything that I achieved was because of that. And I would also say that many failures that I had were also because of that.
Mm.
Because while the world rushed ahead, I stayed put where I was, refusing to move until I was sure that this is a step that I need to take.
Mm.
But the sum total of it, I would say at the end of at this point in time where I'm like going to be 60 next year, okay, in 2023, the sum total of it, I'm glad I was like that. And I'm glad I'm really going to remain like that for the rest of the life that I live also.
Mm. Mm.
Because nothing that I've done has been hurried, put together, done for the heck of it. Like I see almost everything around me happening that way,
Right.
So uh, I guess there are many people like us, you and me, and I think we are the ones who then end up being a step behind everything and making sure that this history that we are also making in our lives doesn't get lost. You are documenting that history. I'm documenting that history through all the work that we are doing. And that is very, very necessary, you know.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
I remember it's not, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I also remember how much toil, how much heart you have put in everything that you have done. Like, I remember reading your interview and with me only, where you said that, you went hungry sometimes and you couldn't pay rent. So you were crashing in with your friends while you were struggling for a toehold in. And then you started as an assistant director, I think, with the serial Ye Jo Hai Zindagi at a time
Which is,
when,
yeah.
right?
Yes, yes, yes. Go on. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, I think, a period where television, I think, was at its purest in India, because uh, content creation was about quality, not quantity, and exactly what you're saying, that people had time to think and create something which was different from the next thing that was coming or had already come and gone. And then, of course, you reached the 90s, you saw the industry evolving, and you, much, much before, that's where your foresight again comes in. A series like Sex and the City and modern women, bonding, like so many OTT stories are about modern women who are trying to find their way professionally, personally, in their relationships. You brought Tara uh, in the early 90s. And you said at that time that you saw people like Mahesh Bhatt and Amit Khanna and so many more creating something that, that was unique and different. And then the quality of the content became to degenerate alongside the quality of the politics that had started degenerating as well. I found that, and this was what, when you said this to me, I think over 10 years ago. And we have seen that happen now even more,
Further.
dramatically in the last
Yeah.
few years. Uh, the way your uh, Tara was yanked off unceremoniously from Z, that is a story that still sends shivers down my spine, because not only was the story of that show attacked, but you were attacked personally during that whole episode. Would you be comfortable going back and recalling that?
Before I got the job as an assistant director, I was more fortunate to meet Nadira Babaji, and I worked with her as a production assistant in Titliyan, which was a series that was before Ye Jo Hai Zindagi
I remember
or
that.
during the same time.
Yeah.
And I also assisted her in theater, and I did theater with her. And it was through theater that I found my friends and I found my groove and I found my world and I became a part of Ye Jo Hai Zindagi. And that's where I first was an assistant director. And life went on. That was the 1980s, I think we are talking about. And it was the time of the purest form of television that we've had, what it was, what television is meant to be
Meant.
for, and why uh, and an electronic device is so important to the world, because it transports ideas and thoughts and content to the rest of the world. And yeah, so Ye Jo Zindagi, and then Puraskar, and then assisted Ramesh Talwar ji for a film which he was making at that time, and then I did assistant with Shekhar Kapoor also. I was assisting for a little while. Subsequently, I think the satellite television era came, and that was around 1990, 1991. And it so happened that I was part of that surge, ready to plunge as a creative force, because I had trained, I had worked hard. From a fifth assistant, I had made it to a chief assistant director. I had made a couple of documentaries, produced and directed a couple of very small, cheaply priced documentaries. I had worked with UNICEF and made short films. So I was at the threshold of this particular revolution, which was called satellite television, myself as well as an individual. And sure enough, that opportunity, when it came my way, gave me Tara to make, to produce, and I wrote it as well. Obviously, it was the best opportunity that I could have ever imagined getting. And of course, we gave it everything we had. I gave it my entire heart. So did the girls who were acting in it. So did my then partner, director of the show, Raman Kumar. I mean, it was our life, it was our soul. And we did everything we could. And it was such a rage and it became such a hit. Even Sex in the City and Friends came later. But I still say that a Tara and a Banegi Apni Baat came first. These were ideas for television which the West picked up from India. So we were way ahead of our time. And I'm not saying I was ahead of my time. We were. I think India was. It was way ahead in terms of its ideation and thinking at that point in time. And that's why Tara happened. I was part of a scheme of things, I would say. Um, Obviously, because it did very, very well. Uh, like, and I was not such an integral part of television, no legacy, no background, nothing. I didn't realize it when I started getting one serial upon another to produce, you know. So then came V3 Plus, and then came Satranj, then came Umeed, then came Rahe, and then Agni Chakra, and so many other serials that followed. I made 16 serials, one after another, between 1992 when Tara started and 2006 when Millie ended for me, and television ended with Millie for me. So you keep saying that I had these insights and I foresaw something, but maybe it's my awareness of who I am and why I am here and now. I was aware of where I was and what was happening to me. Unlike the rest of my industry at that time, if you were caught up with the tele, and even now, the world becomes so small that everyone gets so caught up with it, they forget the rest of the world around them. I was somehow not that way.
Hmm.
I was aware at that time of a very, very interesting, very, I would say, treacherous turn that the country was taking. I could sense the Mahartis that were happening all over the place, and this overt Hindutva which was not called Hindutva in those days, but the Hindu assertion had started, I would say. And that was also bothering me a lot at that point in time, because I'm a Hindu like you are. And to me it was okay to be a Hindu. I mean, like, and I've actually felt very privileged to be a Hindu in this country always. And it has always given me that sense of that there is something being denied to the others, which I was not very comfortable with ever since I was a child, right? And so all of those things were happening at that time between 92 and 97. I saw the managements changing. The people at the top in our business suddenly were out, and there were new people who came in on the at the top. And with that, and at that time I was not even like, I was in my 30s, right? So I was not so mature as I am today. So suddenly the language, the tenor, and the thought process that was being injected into the very creative work that I was doing was not uh, comfortable. It was dissonant, you know. And me being who I was and the way I was argumentative, and I would ask questions because that's what I was taught to do throughout my growing up years. And that asking of questions was not a very, very comfortable thing for the people who were at the top now, suddenly, who just expected that everybody would do as they said. So while everybody was doing as they said, here was someone who was a right at the top herself in her game. So it wasn't so easy that you could pull down 4 serials which were running at top ratings. And B, I was asserting myself, which they did not like. I was refusing to do which morally did not agree with me. And it is during that time that overnight I just got a message telling me that you are requested to come to the channel, because there were certain changes in the storytelling that I was asked to do, which I said no to. Sure enough, I went to the channel, and the next morning, next afternoon, or whatever time of the day it was, and I was told point blank that we are taking off all your serials from air within a week. And I was like, of course, very, very shocked that how can a channel just throw away a very lucrative profit making machine out of the window? But that was a risk they were ready to take at any cost. It did not matter. But the narrative was changing and I was defying it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because I was defying it, I needed to be just thrown out of the way. So I did, of course, question, and I said, nothing doing, and you can't do this to me. And I was just told point blank that get out of the country. Women like you should be thrown out of the country, you know? And that was it. Within a week, without even giving us an opportunity, because the next whole week's episodes were all ready. There was Tara, there was Umid, there was Rahat, which was a daily soap, the first daily soap for satellite television. And there was, I think, one more series, V3 Plus. All of them went off the air within a week without getting closure, nothing. And almost a 250 to 300 strong organization was just brought down overnight. And this entire this entire human resource that was with us within the next 3 months was part of Balaji. And Balaji was suddenly churning out serial upon serial, and by 2000 there was, you could make out in the next 3 years what had happened.
Yeah.
Of course he regretted it, of course ZTV regretted it, of course the boss, the chairman, regretted it. He called us back, tried to make up for it. But what they didn't realize was that you broke the back of someone who had built this structure through sheer hard work. So your regret is not going to resurrect what you had destroyed.
Hmm.
And then, of course, many other things happened in my life, which kind of, pushed me further back.
Right.
And the confidence went, confidence goes. You start questioning your own decisions, you start questioning your own self, whether you were right or wrong. And even right now, when I'm talking to you, I'm talking in retrospect, and now I understand things much better than I did then. But these understandings only came to me later, they weren't there then. For me, it was just plain at that moment insult, humiliation. Someone at the top of her game had been just culled,
Yeah.
and she was a woman, you know. So
Yeah, I
then those
remember.
questions also arise.
Yeah, you I remember you saying that
So
your
even,
your
Yeah.
father had taught you that, to never use being a woman as the excuse.
Exactly.
He had
Exactly.
told you that. But the fact is that
Yes.
your being a woman made you vulnerable in so many ways because you were targeted professionally and personally as a woman.
Yes.
And
It's a question I've also often asked my mother as to why my father foresaw so many things but did not foresee the fact that his daughters will not use the woman card, which he taught us not to use, but the rest of the world would not be ready for it. The
right.
rest of the world would not be ready for a woman sitting, looking eye to eye, and talking
Mm,
business to it, you
true.
know. So there are all those dichotomies that are there in place. So one doesn't know what to really go by. But in retrospective, it was obviously a change of narrative and it happened overnight. And the world changed and much more content was being made. And
Hmm.
all this content was overnight, like eliminating India's diversity. All this content that was churning out, it was also, see, even the footprint was growing. And so were more and more people joining the television revolution by becoming audience to it. And as that was happening, suddenly between 1998 and 2002, in content, in in on that screen, which was which had pervaded almost every household, there was a homogeneous India which outside that screen did not exist like that. And it was also make believe, you know.
Hmm. That's what you said when you
So
said this is
exactly.
schizophrenia,
Yeah.
which is happening.
Yeah.
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 You also said that, uh, a country, like you just said, that it was about diversity, it became ritualistic and religion and dogma driven. And you also said that you prefer, alternative storytelling to mainstream storytelling. But the problem, you said this again, I'm telling you, 10 years ago. The alternative also becomes the mainstream, which is what is happening today because OTT storytelling, which started as this free spirited and, non derivative idea, is also now falling into a certain rut. And which is what do you see that happening?
Definitely. I mean, see, I had been through one cycle, and that cycle was it was very, very obvious that what was that cycle about? Why was a certain narrative thrown out of the window and a new narrative brought out? When satellite television happened, there were fewer urban people who were at the receiving end of it as audience. As the audience grew, the gatekeeping became more intense. Because when the audiences grow is when the gatekeepers start getting terrified. What if the so-called hypocrisies that we practice are exposed? And
That
that is exactly
that they
why
don't like.
television, so
That
yeah,
they
that
don't
they
like.
don't like. So television obviously went into that mass media, mass audience space. And when it went there, the gatekeeping came into place and all the alternative content was put on the side. Same thing has happened to OTT now. It's the second cycle in my lifetime. And I'm sure people in a generation before me have had several other such cycles as well. That is the truth of our country. That every time the commoner starts, uh, you know, accepting new ideas, youth especially starts adapting to new ideas, it does definitely scare the traditionalists who are the, gatekeepers of our
And also nobody likes
civility.
nobody likes the narrative to be appropriated. Nobody likes the
Yes,
narrative to be independent because then there's danger that the questioning will start, then the free thinking will
exactly,
start.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Another
Yeah,
thing that you said, which I found interesting, is that every progressive nation has used television as a propeller for change, like you just said. And creativity should be driven by intellect, not by economics. And you have shared stories of how you've seen writers being shortchanged, and you've seen, what you called as deal makers passing off as creative people. And you've talked about sets which didn't have proper toilets for women, and you have worked for like 12 hours. You literally ruined your kidneys because you didn't want to go to those loos, you
Yeah.
know. And so there is what you said, I want to, when I work, I want to avoid the deliberate chaos and the corruption. And has anything changed at all, or have things grown worse since that time?
See, nothing changes. That is the sad part. In all developed countries, if you see, television has been a driver of change and progressive ideas, right? And if you see that their cinema never diminished because television grew. I mean, today there are roughly, I think, 8 theaters for every million in India compared to China and US. US has 125 theaters to a million. China has some in between number, but India has the least. So cinema, which was in the 1970s before television came, was very pervasive. It was very revolutionary. It was really driving ideas, telling stories. Once television came in, it kind of came into a controlled space, right? And by the time the powers that be realized that this could be controlled, there was a deliberate attempt to diminish cinema, which had the freedom to talk about harmony, to talk about Muslim, Amar Akbar Antonies and the Diwars of the world, which kind of, they were very commercial, very mainstream, but these were the films that also kind of mirrored a lot about Indian society, about poverty, etc., etc. So that was one factor that happened with television coming, and television obviously became a controlled medium, and where the message was there was gatekeeping to every message that was going out. The same has continued to happen successively. So every time you feel, because storytelling really is what which makes people change in very profound ways, you know. But when stories become content, and instead of the storyteller driving the market, it is the content creator driving the market or the business. There's a very big difference. It's not a small thing.
Hmm.
A storyteller is you, me, a ordinary person from the back of the beyond who tells a great story. That's all. Our literature has all of that. But a content creator is a decided uh, hire by a human resource, uh, uh, sort of a universe for a particular purpose, and who is looking at Excel sheets to decide the fate of a film or
Hmm.
a series or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's
You know.
that's what I hear a lot, because
So,
it's become so regimented and it's become so cut and dried. It's like a
yeah.
cookie,
So
cookie
obviously
cutting
there is.
exercise.
हाँ, जब मैंने ये बिजनेस में मैं जब आई थी फॉर इंस्टेंस, उस टाइम पे आई वाज अ स्टोरी टेलर एंड बिटवीन मी एंड द channel there was nobody else, and now for a storyteller, between a storyteller and a network, there are at least about 10 hierarchies in place. So at every stage the story goes through filtering.
You also said about cinema something interesting. You said that cinema has to be a projection of a country's reality, like you just said, that it has to project who we are. But you also
Yeah.
said that somewhere along the 90s, we kind of lost grasp over our own selfhood as a nation. We forgot who we are, or we got confused, or we got lost, and that sense of confusion started impacting what we are making. Because today, when people are talking about how Hindi cinema is losing out on in terms of footfalls and eyeballs, in comparison to southern films, uh, do you think that this the statement that you made then, I mean, so many years ago, it's coming true, and the flaws are coming home to roost because there is no authenticity in the storytelling in Hindi cinema anymore, you know?
So there are two parts. The answer to this question of yours is in two parts. I think at that time when I spoke to you, I was more like a skeptic to cinema. I do still feel that cinema has the power and the push to really bring change in many ways, which is why I talk about films like Amar Akbar Anthony and Diwar and uh, others, because they were very reflective of our society, even though they were formulaic, right? The formula itself used to be very powerful.
Yeah.
The storytelling did not, the formula did not overpower the storytelling, you know. So it was in the 80s and 90s when we really went down when we slid, and
Yeah,
it went
I
completely
think,
haywire and everything was lost.
no, no, I was just thinking that, there's this whole thing called the niyat in filmmaking, like intention.
Hmm.
I think that has gotten besmirched at some point because, like you said, a film like Amar Akbar Anthony, it was made with very pure niyat, like there's an intentionality behind cinema like that, that you want to say something which is meaningful, even though the way you say
Right.
it is entertaining.
Yes.
So,
So see, but what also happened in the years of the decade of the 70s was the fact that there was a middle of the road of cinema that emerged. There was
yeah,
a art cinema that emerged, and these cinemas survived even the assault of uh, nonsensical cinema that happened in the 80s and 90s. A Satya happened in the 90s, right?
yeah.
And independent cinema survived the 80s and the 90s. And independent cinema has survived the post millennium, from 2000 to 2022. So, irrespective of that, Hindi cinema in the independent and art space has survived it and continued to survive because truth prevails. And I believe very strongly in that today, you know. So the fight continues, but the truth prevails irrespective. And independent cinema invariably survives because it's so low budget that it recovers its cost. What fails is mainstream cinema, formulaic cinema, because it's so huge in budget that if it fails, there are many people who die along with it, right? This, what I feel between the South and the North, Hindi cinema and South cinema, is I think a passing phase. There is another truth to it also, the fact that single screen cinemas have survived in South India, whereas the single screen cinemas in North India do not exist any longer. Multiplexes took over. Multiplexes are too expensive for a common man. उन दिनों की बात थी जब स्टॉल, अपर स्टॉल, लोअर स्टॉल, अपर स्टॉल, बैल्कनी और क्या कहते हैं ड्रेस सर्कल होता था, एंड ubiquitously all kinds of classes could enjoy the same film together. Today, that has been snatched away because of the multiplex revolution, and single screens closed down. They will have to revive their single screens again. They will have to make cinema cheaper again for Hindi cinema to survive. And which is why the South Indian cinema is doing very well, because it has its own cinemas running where it can release its films, and in the rest of India also it's releasing its films. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a distribution fault line that needs to be corrected. Otherwise, nothing's wrong with the Hindi film industry and is doing pretty well right now.
You worked for a while as a director of ideation for Z, right?
Yeah.
And you became an author after quitting television. You started blogging as well. White noise also happened at some point during
In
that time.
2003 and 4, yes.
Yeah.
Post
Um,
CT.
yeah. Something that you said was that what gives you hope is this idea that there is more to the world than what meets the eye. Um, what gives you hope today? What do you see that makes you optimistic about politics, cinema, television? Do you see any hope at all?
See, I've never felt hopeless, not even for one day in my life. Even after whatever I have gone through at every stage of my life, I've got up and walked, because I think I've been fortunate that I had the ability and the education and the understanding of the world to be able to do that. So I never felt hopeless for a single day in my life. And the real hope that I have comes from people like you, me, and the many others like us who who strive and work every day irrespective of the returns to keep the truth alive. Which is why today I feel very strongly attached to the Bharat Jodo Yatra. Because actually people do not understand the meaning of someone walking
Mhm.
3,000, 3,500 kilometers to know his country and be not doing it for votes. People don't understand it. But people like you and I understand it because we are doing our work. I'm blogging, I'm running the Daily Eye, you're running your platform. The biggest gift you and me have is to be able to speak the truth because we are not looking for returns. And that's the gift that we see Rahul Gandhi have to be able to go for this Bharat Jodo Yatra without looking for returns. He's got everything, na? वो वोट्स नहीं मांग रहा है और उसी चीज में होप है रीमा क्योंकि हमारे जैसे लोग अगर वी आर अलाइव एंड सर्वाइव्ड and we've survived and there are many more people like us who will also survive and stay alive and keep on being the way they are without having to change themselves because of the circumstances. I think that's where the hope lies.
That's good to hear. Uh,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that the struggle has ended or that there is a
I
dawn.
always feel that corrupt to be corrupt or to make be to make adjustments is a bigger struggle than to be comfortably who you are and wear the skin, be proud of the skin you're wearing.
Yeah, you're
I
right.
feel that no, I don't feel the struggle at all in being who I am. The day I have to dress up कि अब रीमा मेरी इंटरव्यू ले रही है और उसके लिए मुझे तैयार होना है पूरा मेकअप करना है मेरे बैटरी ऑफ लोग आएंगे और मेरा वो that gives me anxiety.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what this doesn't. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm being who I am without fear or favor, and that is not a struggle at all.
That's a
But the
gift.
minute I have to be nice to somebody who's hypocritical or be good to somebody and be deliberately polite with somebody who actually is a criminal,
Mm,
it'll be a struggle. Actually, I will not be able to win over. I will not be able to survive that struggle.
yeah. Authenticity, like they say, no,
Yes,
it's a gift, and not
it's a gift.
everybody can afford it. So
Yes. I feel very gifted. And I know that all my kind of people like you and others, Mona hai, so many of us, we are very gifted because we have no issues in life. There's no struggle.
right.
We are happy, and we have been given the a gift from God to be able to write, to be able to express, to be able to talk, make sense, to have people admire us, you know have people actually meet you on at some place in a in a mall or somewhere and say that, oh, you're so and so. I really like what you said at such and such place, or I really read your interview and you said this. I say I'm a friend of yours on Facebook. So many of my friends on Facebook haven't met physically, suddenly meet me somewhere. They say, oh, we love what you write. I think that's really what it's all about.
Yeah,
That's what gives me all the hope in the world that I'm not lost, I'm not struggling. And by some strange sort of you can say um, providence, I've always earned enough to live a decent life. I've never had to go and, I've had bad days economically, but not had to go really rubbing my nose on the ground for anything,
yeah.
you know. Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I think that's beautiful about you is that
Yeah.
there is certain childlike innocence and trust in the universe still, despite
Yeah.
all the struggles that have happened, and you have dealt with them and you have moved on. You're not
Yeah.
allowed
Yes.
yourself to simmer in them, and you've
Yeah.
moved
No, no,
on.
no.
Yeah. So
No, no,
that's a
no. I mean,
hugely inspiring thing about you, and I hope and pray that
thank you. Thank
continues.
you.
And you
Thank you so
continue
much.
to smile and bring smiles on everybody's face because you're such a wonderful soul. There's such sweetness in you. such
Oh,
innocence.
please, please. Now I want to see you smiling, Rima. You don't know how lovely you are.
Right. This is
Yeah.
not my interview. This is
You're
yours.
such an amazing person, and that book of yours we have to make one day, and we have to make it into a series, you know?
That will be
Yeah.
your return on the small screen. Let's say.
Yes, yes.
Let's
I think golden
manifest
words.
that.
It's going to come true. Yes.
Love
Yeah.
you, love you. Thank you so
Love
much,
you so much. Thank you so
and
much.
more
Lovely
power,
talking to you.
more power to you.
Hi, this is Rima, and if you liked what you just saw, then do like and subscribe because remember, this is a safe space for people to talk, share their stories, to hear each other, make some time in their busy lives for unboxed conversations.